Has the United States trapped itself in a strategic snare? By stepping into the flames of confrontation ignited between Israel and Iran, has the United States pushed itself into a geopolitical trap from which it may not be easy to escape? The history of international politics shows that while starting a war may appear simple, ending it with dignity is far more difficult. For any superpower, military action is not merely a matter of missiles and fighter jets. It is also connected to its global influence, economic stability, strategic reputation, and domestic political balance. Today, the same question is being raised. Did Washington underestimate Tehran's strategic depth? Was it assumed that a few limited airstrikes, strong statements, and military pressure would force Iran to step back? Or was it believed that a display of power alone would be sufficient? A regional conflict or a question of global balance? The tension between Israel and Iran is not new. For decades, both countries have stood against each other ideologically, strategically, and politically. But when the United States becomes directly or indirectly involved, it no longer remains a dispute between two nations. It becomes a question of global power balance. America has long been a strategic partner of Israel. But direct intervention is always risky, because once a superpower steps onto the battlefield, every move it makes affects distant regions, whether the Asia-Pacific or Europe. A warning from history. History offers many examples where powerful nations underestimated the capability and determination of their opponents. When Russia implemented its military strategy in Ukraine, the initial expectation was of swift success, but the reality emerged as a prolonged war, economic sanctions, and international pressure. Is the United States heading toward a similar situation? This question is important because modern wars are not won by conventional military strength alone. They are shaped by a mix of economic sanctions, information warfare, cyber attacks, and diplomatic equations. Donald Trump's perspective. Donald Trump has repeatedly argued that if the United States does not take a decisive stance, Iran will further expand its influence in the region. According to him, limited and precise action can prevent a prolonged conflict. But the question is, does limited action truly remain limited? Often, an initial strike gives rise to a response, and the response turns into retaliation. Breaking this cycle is not easy. Iran's asymmetric strategy. Amid decades of sanctions and pressure, Iran has shaped its military policy in a way that it relies more on asymmetric warfare rather than conventional war. Low-cost drones, long-range missiles, a network of regional allied groups, and cyber capabilities, these serve as both its strategic shield and sword. It does not fight direct tank versus tank battles. It strikes at points where the opponent is vulnerable: energy supplies, maritime routes, digital infrastructure, or regional bases. The risk of regional instability. Security at American bases in the Gulf region has been increased. Additional vigilance is being exercised at embassies. This means the threat is not limited only to a confined military front. If the conflict widens, energy infrastructure, maritime trade routes, and oil supplies could be affected. The United Nations has also appealed for restraint. The international community fears that if this confrontation spreads, stability in the Middle East could be seriously affected. Domestic political pressure. Within the United States, this issue has also become a source of division. Some consider it a necessary step for security, while others see it as an unnecessary risk. Protests in cities like New York and Washington indicate that a section of the public is wary of prolonged wars. The experiences of Iraq and Afghanistan are still fresh. Despite initial military success, those campaigns dragged on for years. The economic cost and human toll sparked widespread debate. Moral and diplomatic dimensions. War is not only a matter of strategic calculations, it also influences moral discourse. If reports of attacks on civilian areas emerge, international sympathy can shift rapidly. In the age of social media, every incident is instantly broadcast on a global scale. In such a situation, both the United States and Israel must pay attention to their moral standing, because international support is linked not only to military power but also to moral credibility. Global power balance. This conflict could impact the Asia-Pacific and Europe as well. China may see an opportunity to strengthen its strategic position on the Taiwan issue if America's focus is diverted. Russia may also attempt to adjust its equations in Europe. Thus, a regional confrontation could lead to broader geopolitical changes. Strategy, economy, and the direction of the future. The possibility of economic shocks. The Middle East is not only a region of political tension, it is also the center of the global energy system. If the conflict continues for long, instability in the oil market is inevitable. Even a slight disruption in supplies from the Gulf region could push international prices upward. The direct impact of expensive energy is not limited to fuel stations. Transportation costs rise, production becomes expensive, and inflationary pressure spreads across the broader economy. Europe has already experienced an energy crisis. Asian economies are dependent on imports. If tensions escalate, the impact will be felt worldwide. A prolonged military campaign means higher defense spending. The United States is already facing massive budget deficits and debt pressure. If defense expenditure increases further, domestic programs, healthcare, education, infrastructure may face strain. That is why many policy experts warn that military decisions must be weighed not only strategically but also economically. Strategic dilemma. The biggest challenge before Washington is deciding at what point to stop. If it steps back, critics will say it gave incomplete support to its ally. If it moves forward, the risks could multiply many times. This is the strategic labyrinth in which superpowers often get trapped. Every move invites a response, and after each response, a new strategy must be formulated. The beginning of a war may seem controlled, but its expansion often takes unexpected paths. Psychological dimension. In any conflict, not only weapons, but morale is decisive. If a nation feels that its prestige or existence is at stake, it may become more resolute instead of retreating. The concept of resistance is deeply rooted in Iran's political culture. Decades of sanctions and pressure have shaped a mindset of enduring rather than yielding. If American policymakers assumed that limited strikes would bring Tehran to the negotiating table, they may have underestimated this psychological factor. Information warfare and the cyber front. Modern conflicts are not confined to traditional battlefields. Digital infrastructure, banking networks, communication systems, all can become potential targets. If cyber attacks begin, their effects may extend beyond borders. Panic in financial markets, data leaks, communication shutdowns, these scenarios could heighten global instability. In this context, it is also important that international laws and norms regarding cyber warfare are still evolving. As a result, the nature of retaliatory action may remain ambiguous, further complicating the situation. Complexities of regional politics. Many countries in the Middle East are trying to maintain balance. They are avoiding openly siding with one party. The reasons are clear: economic interests, domestic politics, and security concerns. If the conflict spreads, maritime routes, especially those used for energy transport, could be at risk. This would affect global trade. For smaller nations, this dilemma is even more difficult as they seek security guarantees while also trying to maintain regional balance. Global power equations. American foreign policy has always been multi-regional. Asia Pacific, Europe, the Middle East, its role in each region is linked with different priorities. If more military and diplomatic energy is consumed in the Middle East, its engagement in other regions may decline. This could provide opportunities for rival powers. This is not only a question of military presence, but also of diplomatic focus and allocation of resources. The world is moving toward a multipolar structure, and in such a scenario, any major decision has wide-reaching consequences. The possibility of diplomacy. Although tensions are high, the doors of diplomacy are not considered completely closed. Often, negotiations continue behind the scenes. The role of mediating countries could be crucial.
If both sides realize that a prolonged conflict is not in their interest, there may be room for a limited agreement, but this requires political will and patience, moral image and international support. For any superpower, its moral image is also strategic capital. If the international community perceives the action as disproportionate, support may decline. In the age of social media, images of civilian casualties quickly influence global opinion. International institutions may demand investigations. In such circumstances, along with military strategy, communication strategy becomes equally important. Possible scenarios. In the coming months, several paths may open. Limited conflict and swift peace. After a few intense incidents, both sides exercise restraint and the situation stabilizes. Prolonged but controlled confrontation. No direct war, but tensions persist through proxies and limited strikes. Wider regional expansion. If allied countries become involved, the conflict could spread across multiple fronts.